Program discussing how policies, history, and culture affect regular Middle Tennesseans. I'm Sandy Rice, and my guest today is M. Chitty. Welcome and thank you, M, for coming in today on somewhat short notice.
Thank you, Sandy.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement in politics.
Well, I just moved back to Sewanee. I was born in Sewanee in 1954, and I've been in Knoxville I was in Knoxville for 35 years. In Knoxville, I was involved with common sense gun reform with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And since I came back to Sewanee, I've been involved in efforts against a potential sand quarry on the Cumberland Plateau. I've been working with SOCM, S-O-C-M, which is the statewide organizing for community empowerment, but we know it in this area as Save Our Cumberland Mountains. And I get involved in politics because I care about the community where I live, and I really care about my country.
Great. We're going to discuss the SAVE Act. SAVE is acronym for Safeguard American Voting Eligibility Act. This bill would require all voters to provide proof of U.S. citizenship, like a passport or birth certificate, when registering to vote or updating their voter registration. Opponents of the bill say it could potentially disenfranchise millions of American voters by making it more difficult to vote. So, does that sound like a good idea? Only real Americans should vote. Em, what do you think?
Well, I think that, on the surface that sounds great, and it's true. All eligible Americans should be able to vote. But this SAVE Act puts some barriers up, some unnecessary barriers up to voting. I think of this as calling the fire department and saying, "Oh, my house is on fire," but your house really isn't on fire. Now, because the SAVE Act is saying that the house is on fire, and it's saying that millions of non-citizens are voting, this is simply not true. Now, if you called the fire department and you say my house is on fire, you're going to get a penalty of thousands of dollars, maybe jail time. But our national house is not on fire about who votes. Right now, under our current law, you already have to attest or swear that you are a citizen. If you lie, you can be permanently deported. So my question is, why would anybody risk being deported when they're already here without documents and they know that they're in a very, very vulnerable position? The answer is they don't do it. In 2017, the Brennan Center for Justice found they looked at 23.5 million voters or votes, and they found 30 cases of non-citizen voting. This is not going to swing any election. Our house is not on fire. This is a solution to a problem that does not exist.
So this is asking people to vote, Americans, everyone, to register in person. This is if you're not registered. The driver's license won't work because it doesn't prove where you were born. It doesn't prove citizenship. Now, there is this real ID that's been knocking around for several years to be able to do domestic travel.
Right, but that comes into the real ID becomes required in 2 days from today.
Right, on Wednesday.
Right,
so
on Wednesday. So I just flew from Washington to Nashville, and I'm lucky I already had my driver's license updated. But if I didn't have it, in 2 days I would just be turned away at the gate.
Yeah, but even this is to vote.
Right.
To not go anywhere at all.
Right.
A U.S. passport is a lot of people don't have a passport. They don't plan on traveling. You need that for international travel. It takes 4 to 6 weeks to get it. There's forms. There's a charge. You need a picture. I've done it. It lasts for 10 years. It's a good investment. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that, you got to go get it.
Right. There
get
are
one.
Right, and about half of U.S. citizens, about 51% of U.S. citizens have it. So But that means that about 150 million Americans do not have a passport.
Okay.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So these are all people that would have to have one to vote. There's also some other things I think less common that people have is military service records showing U.S. birth and a government ID showing U.S. birth as well. And then, of course, speaking of birth, your birth certificate. Now, that nasty little thing is sometimes hard to find.
Well, right, and so you have to have a certified birth certificate, and that can be different from the birth certificate that you got from the hospital or that your mother got from the hospital when you were born.
With your feet on it.
Yeah, with your feet on it. That's
not a legal document.
I don't think that's it. I don't think that's a legal document. You can, if you were adopted, you have to have your adoption record.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Right, and if you were born abroad, you have to have a birth record from a U.S. consulate.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So,
and if you were naturalized, you need your that is, if you came from another country and you became a U.S. citizen eligible to vote, you have to have that certificate. And if you're a Native American, you have to have a Native American card that proves that you're a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
So.
Well, I think the most common problem that we would have with this law in Congressional District 4, Franklin County, our area, is women getting married when this passes.
Right. So about somewhere between 80 and 85% of women change their names on marriage. And, when you get married, you might get married in various circumstances. You might get married by your grandfather in a parlor. You might get married at the courthouse. You might get married in a church. Whatever happens, normally, I've been married, so I was married, and so you gradually change your documents. You don't go to a judge to say, okay, I need to get all of my documents. You just gradually assume your married name because that is our cultural custom.
It's a cultural custom, yes,
and
very much so.
That's what we do. But
the marriage certificate itself wouldn't get you in the voting booth because it doesn't match your birth certificate.
That's the issue, is that you have to prove your citizenship with your current name. If you need to prove your citizenship with your birth certificate, you had your maiden name, right? And now you've got your driver's license in your married name. They don't match. If there's a discrepancy, they're going to put up, you have to produce a document that shows that you were born a U.S. citizenship. Here's my question about that. Okay, let's say that I have to go to a judge, I have to make an appointment at a court to get my birth certificate altered to my married name?
Oh, that's very expensive.
And well, the thing is, too, now you've got a document that tells a lie because you were not born
with that name.
With that name.
Yeah.
You were born with your maiden name.
Yeah, better to get a passport.
Better to get a passport, but it's just
a real ID by Wednesday.
By Wednesday, yeah.
Well, it's what happens when you put more steps into voter registration?
Oh, all kinds of things. I think
people don't vote.
Well, people don't vote, and if they have to go through all these extra steps, they might just give up. And I think that's part of the intention. Honestly, is to make it really hard to vote. Because if you make it really hard to vote, and if there are certain populations that tend to vote against your party, you're going to essentially be able to suppress the vote. Okay. All right, so what happens? The ramifications of this are pretty big. I think over the last, we're now in 2025. Let's say Voters' Rights Act was in 1965. Okay, so we're looking at most of the people who are alive today, even the old people like me. We've been living in an era in which we tried to give people the right to vote. The Voting Rights Act, in, I think it was 1965, made it possible for black people who they had theoretically the right to vote since the end of the Civil War, but they didn't really, because if they tried to vote in the South, at least their house might be burned, or they might be beat up, or they might be killed. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965 really brought the hammer down on that kind of suppression.
Well, and also poll taxes and asking,
Exactly,
demanding,
poll taxes.
can you recite the Declaration of Independence and who have been the presidents, and just really ridiculous things.
Right,
So,
and they were intended to suppress votes.
Right.
Okay, so you and I have been living in a whole era, decades, 4 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, of trying to open the vote to people who are eligible to vote, with the idea that if everyone in a society can vote, you have a healthier society.
Right.
Because you can address the needs of different
and we're
people.
a representative government, so the people that we elect are supposed to represent us and be in contact with us.
Right. So think about, if we take ourselves back 106 years, I'm choosing that for a reason. Okay, let's take ourselves back to 1919. In 1919, women did not have the right to vote.
Right.
And so the whole idea was that men would be able to, that men knew the concerns of women well enough to represent them. Well, I don't know that I know a single man who really understands everything about being a woman, and they don't want to. I mean, I don't understand everything about being a man. But, as a woman, my grandmother in 1919, which was the year she was married, did not have the right to vote. And she had to depend on her husband casting a vote, and if she disagreed with him, he would go with his own opinion.
Yeah.
So you really do have serious ramifications there for women and for minorities.
Let's talk a little bit about let's talk about Tennessee, voting in Tennessee.
Okay.
We are last in voter turnout year after year. Of the 5
Really last? We're 50th out of 50?
I think at one time we were 51, and I wasn't sure.
Maybe that's Puerto Rico.
I think so. I think so. But no, year after year, dead last. Of the 5.3 million voters in Tennessee, 2.3 million almost half have not voted in the previous 3 federal elections.
Wow.
But we are number 1 in election integrity, and we're very proud of that. Well, if you don't let people vote, get to the voting box, that's the way it's going to be.
So you're going to have
very safe voting because nobody votes.
Very safe voting because you've restricted the number of people who can vote.
Now, our Secretary of State, who is overvoting in Tennessee, Trey Hargett, is concerned about this low voter turnout because he says we have mostly non-competitive races and apathy. So I always love it when the public is blamed, for a problem. So he's done very little bit about it. There's lots and lots of information on the website. It's really mind-boggling. I think that's kind of a problem too. But it's more complex than that. There's a lot of voter suppression. Our state senator, Janice Bowling, has supported doing total paper ballots at one point and eliminating completely early voting.
Well, that's one of the things that will
it didn't pass, of course, but
right,
just that it was suggested.
But when we're looking at the ramifications of the SAVE Act, one of the things about it, I'm just going to bring it back to that just for a second. The SAVE Act, in addition to the things we've just talked about, makes it a federal crime for election officials, to register anyone without that documentation. So think about that here in Franklin County. Okay, let's say that, I haven't lived here all my life, but I lived here all of my young life, and I'm finishing my life here, but I was born here. Okay, let's say I go down to Winchester and I want to register to vote. And I know the person at let's say I went to elementary school with the person who's registering me to vote. And she says, "Hi, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you since 3rd grade." And I go, "Yeah, that's great, wonderful." And then she looks at my documentation. Now, if I don't have the kind of documentation that she needs, it becomes a federal crime for her to register me without those documents, even if she's known me all her life. Okay, and we're going to have situations like this. It's not a common sense thing. So here are the services that go away with the SAVE Act. No registration by mail because it has to be in person.
To register,
right?
yes.
And by the way, that's how many old people in nursing homes who have the right to vote but can't get down to the registration office. They're automatically knocked out after decades of being American citizens, right?
And they've moved here from another state, maybe to be closer to their families.
Right.
So that would
and their mobility is limited. They can't get there. So no registration by mail, no online registration. Think about that. No voter registration drives. Now, those are key to getting.
We've had trouble with that here in Tennessee.
A lot. Yes, right. Because if you criminalize voter registration drives, then you're automatically cutting out, in your own community, tens, hundreds of people. And then there's no automatic registration either. So, and it's been so wonderful to be able to go,
driver's license.
Get your driver's license and get registered to vote. Well, that goes away too. So each one of these is a barrier that is being brought up because, the house is on fire. The house is not on fire. The house is not on fire. But this SAVE Act is really a lie intended to make us think that the house is on fire. We are not in a state of emergency, or at least we weren't, we're not in a chronic state of emergency.
I would say the emergency is more that people aren't voting.
The emergency is that, a lot of people are not voting because they feel powerless. And they're so accustomed to things working in this country. Like if you've ever lived in another country, you know that things don't automatically work. That if you go to Egypt, part of doing business is paying 10 bribes to build a building. But things don't work that way here. They don't work because, our system does work, but people are so accustomed to it that they can't even imagine it not working.
To being easy.
Yeah, they are accustomed to this last 80 years or 70 or 60 years of making it easy for everybody to participate, or everybody legal to participate, and there are good safeguards in place already. The house is not on fire.
I think I have heard in canvassing and being at voter registrations at county fairs or something like that, is people don't want to, come over and register. Of course, they wouldn't be able to do that with this. But and then voting day, we have registration has to be 30 days before an election. I don't know why.
Right. Some states have same-day registration.
Yeah, we don't have same-day registration.
Well, I think that's another barrier.
Yeah, and this restoration of voting privileges, we were written up in the national news about having, 400,000 disenfranchised voters because they had been convicted of a felony.
Right.
Now, somebody jumped to the conclusion that we were wanting voting booths in the prisons. That's an interesting idea. But who is once you served your time, we're supposed to be a nation of forgiveness.
Well, the thing is, if you serve your time, you've served your time.
And you can have your voting rights. Okay, this is the only right that's taken away willy-nilly as well. You can get your right restored, but again, we have the hardest system for doing that in the country.
Is it harder than Florida? Because in Florida, you have to pay every single fine you ever owed.
Well, we have to do that and a whole bunch of other stuff, too.
Oh, wow.
It's a two-step process that you need some legal assistance, and a lot of lawyers don't even know how to do it. So that's a whole lot of people. So we've never had, the drop box and all that.
Right.
Mail-in ballots, you have to have a reason for that. I mean, just if you want to stay home and do a mail-in ballot, you have to have a reason. You've got it good if you're over 65.
My sense is that the Tennessee legislature is because by enacting all these little laws and these little regulations, the SAVE Act would be a similar kind of thing, putting a barrier in place that is not common sense. Its purpose is to make things hard and to make it less likely that that the legislature, they're protecting themselves too, because the less likely people are to vote, the less likely our legislature is to actually represent us. And I remember this. We have a local legislator who just recently said in public to a whole crowd of 30 to 40 people in face of a real problem in their area, in her county, she said, I don't get involved in local issues. And my question is, if you don't get involved in local issues, what are you doing in office? Because our legislators are not responsive to us. They don't care what we think once they get in office, and they just go there and get rich.
Well, and that's certainly the majority. They don't. I think this was Representative Rudder, who we've talked about on this show.
Okay.
She doesn't respond to people or answer back. There's a lot of protests, a lot of letters and calls about the vouchers and our representatives don't meet with the minority and we have a large Republican majority. And, one of the reasons for this show is to not be partisan and angry and dismissive and any other adjective. But sometimes I think people don't know or understand some of the things that are happening in our community and the state, especially laws and bills.
Right.
And so, there's not time. We don't have good communication, systems. We have a weekly paper here in Winchester. We have a weekly paper that takes breaks. And in Suwannee, people balk at the price of maybe the Tennessean or the Chattanooga Times Free Press.
Well, there are now interesting kind of new media publications that are coming up. The Tennessee Holler has been really great. The Tennessee Lookout has been good. So there's kind of guerrilla journalism, because I think big corporations are taking over local media. I remember that the Knoxville News Journal, or News Sentinel, was taken over by Scripps, which is a massive company, and the local news really was reduced. A lot of people were let go. A lot of people were reporting on interesting things. So if you can find it, people do participate in citizen journalism, but our big outlets are increasingly just controlled by these big corporations. They let us know what they want us to know. But we have to be aware that they're doing that.
Right.
And which also gets back to the whole SAVE Act. The SAVE Act is about reducing people's participation in their country, and
communities.
In their communities. And so I'm hoping that anybody who's listening to this program is going to get on the horn and talk to their senators, because this bill is before the Senate.
This is past the House.
It's past the House.
And Representative Desjardins voted for it.
Of course.
Of course. But it is kind of stalled in the Senate. So I would have people, if you believe or are concerned that making it more difficult for even more people to vote is a bad idea, you need to call and email Senators Blackburn and Hagerty to oppose this bill.
Right, because it's going to make it very, very much harder for you if under several conditions, if you move to another neighborhood, a city or state, if you are married and have a different name from your birth certificate, or if you changed your name for any other reason since birth, you're going to have a hard time registering or re-registering to vote. So it's in
Or even registering to vote for the very first time.
or registering to vote for the very first time. So it's very important for people to get on the phones or write their emails or letters to their senators, because it's the Senate that's considering this right now.
And I think that these actions are making a difference. We're starting to see a little juggling of the votes. You're not supposed to always vote with your party. You're supposed to look at the legislation. Now, the Senate is more likely to realize that this is a voter suppression
I think
bill.
they need 60 votes in the Senate for
Yes,
this.
they do. Now, the U.S. House would pass a cheese sandwich bill. They're not. Anyway,
Right now. Yeah, right now.
other actions. I am laughed at this, but consider arranging a U.S. passport for your new graduate as a graduation present. You can't just buy one and hand it over. You help your student with forms, birth certificate, picture, and payment. It's
Yeah, and that payment is going to be,
well, it's going to be $100.
Yeah, or two, depending on what kind of passport they need.
Oppose voter suppression on the state and federal level. It should be easy to vote and still have integrity. What else, Em? What else do you have?
Well, as far as actions, I think contacting your senators and talking to other people about this.
Yes,
Because I think a lot of people, there's a lot of confusion about it. It is not difficult to find the information about how the SAVE Act, if it's passed, will suppress voter participation. It's not hard to find. Just look on the internet. What are the effects of the SAVE Act? And educate yourself and educate your friends.
Yeah, I hear a lot of the excuses for not voting. I mean, this is almost needing a kind of a mind change. The lines are too long. Well, there should be more staff at the polling place to be able to handle those surges. The hours for early voting are 8 to 4:30. Now, it goes on for 2 weeks, but lots and lots of people trying to get here from, you have a lot of people that work outside Winchester, for good job opportunities. And it's about all they can do is to jump in the car at lunch, get here, vote, and get home. And if there's a long line out the door, they have to come back repeatedly.
In Knox County, it's 8 or 9 o'clock.
No, we have one evening that goes till 5:30.
Only till 5:30,
Only
and
till
that
5
cuts
for
out
early
people
voting.
who work. It really does make it hard for people who work. That's crazy.
Early voting is inconsistent across the state.
Right.
So you work in a county and need to vote here, and your coworkers are
Then go
going to
before-
vote here,
Right.
and the hours are different, and they miss it. The early voting. And then the election date is 12 hours, but you have to have a good day so that you can get to vote again, again for the lines. Not having same-day registration. What other reasons? It's too much hassle. I don't know the candidates. They're both bad. They're all bad.
Well, that's just not true. And I think too,
my vote doesn't matter.
and that's not true either, because we have in Franklin County, we have not that many people. Your vote makes a difference.
And you never know when it may be just a few votes. And that has happened for some of the smaller, I don't want to say smaller, but the down ballots.
Right.
People for sheriff and councilman.
Well, I think we all ought to realize that, protecting our votes, all of our citizens need to protect our right to vote if we're eligible. And so it's not a Democratic or Republican or independent issue. It's a citizen issue, and we all ought to say to ourselves, I'm a citizen, I deserve to vote.
Yeah, because if we lost the right to vote, what countries don't get to vote? Can you imagine?
Yeah, I can.
Not having a say
Or
in what happens.
Or there are countries that have the structure to vote, but they don't actually have a free vote, like Russia. I mean, they can have a
line
vote,
up.
but they only have one candidate. So what does that mean? I mean, yeah.
And he's going to stay in that position no matter what.
Life.
Yeah, and there's people around that are, we might have some heckling or something, but we don't have armed people driving around the polling place. We're very lucky, and we are getting some of the trucks.
Well, but we
racing down in Franklin County, racing down the street that's between the tech school and the polling place. That was upsetting. Apparently, revving your truck engine and then laying down skid marks is that's supposed to be impressive. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like intimidation.
That's intimidation. Yeah. Being a poll sitter is interesting. I'm not a poll sitter. You can apply, and they do want younger people to help with the elections inside.
Sure. Yeah.
But I sit there with the party in a tent.
Oh, you observe, and I've worked elections. I've been one of the people in taking the voters, making sure that they were eligible to vote, which is what I did in Knox County. I've done it in several elections, and it's always interesting. And I do hope younger people can do it, but of course, older people often are the ones with the time to do it, and I think, in a way, maybe the wisdom to oversee the process or facilitate the process.
Yeah,
So.
they have a lot of other things on their mind, especially a wedding. You're getting married.
Yeah.
Getting a passport might be one of the last things that you think about.
Right.
We have a little extra time because I don't even see Chuck in there. Let's talk about the house being on fire.
Let's talk about it. What are some other ways? Right now, I'd say that the president has, in the last 3 months, declared by executive order, and I'm kind of keeping track of this because I'm writing a Substack, and every few days I summarize the executive orders. My Substack is called M's Around and About. But I summarize the executive orders that have come down. There have been way more executive orders this presidency than ever before. But in these executive orders, the president has declared not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 8 different states of emergency. And the states of emergency have to do with things from the southern border, the northern border, the trade with China, national security, the use of military on the southern border, all kinds of things that have been declared as states of emergency. I don't think the House was on fire. The House was not on fire. But it's on fire now because we've got these states of emergency, and what those have allowed the president to do is to bypass Congress and to assume powers that he's not given in the Constitution, which is why there have been many suits filed already against what he's done, because what he's doing is, in many cases, unconstitutional, and the only way to fight it out is in court. But what do you think is on fire, or do you what do you think the result of all this house is on fire, the house is on fire activity?
Well, I think that you would
immigration.
Immigration.
Oh, this is a big one.
You would think that undocumented immigrants were killing, raping, stealing, and attacking every corner of the country.
You'd think I'd see that somewhere, and I haven't.
Yeah, I know. Now, in Deckard, we have 2 Mexican restaurants that are side by side, but yeah.
Well, we have Mexican food.
That's
I
weird.
love Mexican food. Well.
But otherwise, we probably know undocumented immigrants working hard and paying taxes, and since they don't have to be marked, or they won't be marked, you never know who they are. But we have a lot of brown people, in Franklin County and everywhere. But it has been, especially in the Tennessee legislature, I had heard that the goal was to make Tennessee so awful that an undocumented immigrant wouldn't set foot here.
Yeah, they're making it very difficult to just live at all.
And, you know, remember that initially in the campaign, the panic was to close the borders because Democrats had it wide open. You know, people were just flowing in.
Well, that's what they said.
Like, you know, a Filing's basement store on Black Fridays or any store. And that was just false. But I continue to hear that constantly. Well, the border is closed now.
Yep.
It is closed tight, and then we're still wanting to send troops there. And then it was going to be, well, to deport gang members and violent criminals. And
Well,
that kind of made sense.
Well, it does, except, you know, in a way, yes, of course. I mean, if we have anybody who's a violent criminal in this country who is a citizen of another country, they need to go to the other country. The question is, how do you determine those things? Like, do you... every person in this country has a couple of rights. As far as I know, they have a right to free speech, even whether they're citizens of another country or not. That's something that they do have certain rights. And everybody, really, especially in a deportation process, everybody should have a right to due process. What does that mean? That means you go up in front of a judge, you you argue your case, you've got an attorney to argue your case, and then you're either found that you're not telling the truth or you are telling the truth, you know, and it's adjudicated. That's our process. It is called due process. But what the Trump administration just did last month was, you know, send 250 or so, 237, something like that, people to this horrible prison in El Salvador that is known to be a place from which you never get out unless you die.
For terrorists. Substandard.
Well, they don't provide medical care. They don't allow you to call your family. So the Trump administration took these men and a whole passel of them without ever letting them see a judge, so they don't actually know who these people are.
Right, or what they've done.
No, it hasn't been adjudicated. So, and now they've sent them to this prison that you can't get out of.
Right. You know, that is, you know, the crime is being in our country illegally. I mean, if that's even proven.
It's a civil crime. It's not a criminal.
Right, but it's certainly not punishable by by these situations, and there's mistakes made. Anyway, Big Chuck let us go a little bit longer.
Yeah, he did. He gave us some extra time, which was wonderful. It was great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, this show has been on voter suppression and the government on fire, which it's not.
The government is not on fire. The house is not on fire. Please do not call the fire department. All right.
But thanks for listening, y'all, to Common Sense Matters. A recording of this program will be on the WZYX website, as well as a podcast, Common Sense Matters, on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We will be back on May 19th with our special guest, Kristen Grimm, and discuss some history in the United States that has affected our ability to have health care for all. Thank you, and thank you, Am, so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandy.